name's Elizabeth Quiroz, and I'm just super grateful, honored to be here. So I just want everybody to know that I am a lived experience expert. So I was trafficked here in San Francisco for 12 years on the streets, sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So for me to be able to be here and share my experiences and give y'all hope that we do overcome and we can use our pain for purpose is full circle for me. And it's also giving everybody hope that whoever you work with out there to end human trafficking, that there's hope for them, that they can be the next doctors, they can be the next attorneys, they can be the next pastors, they can be the next judge. Like the inmates you work with in San Quentin with Ted, the inmates he works with them, they have a purpose too. Even though they're behind bars, they still have a purpose and they have a story. So turn your pain into purpose. So whatever I do talk about, I know I have 10 minutes, but whatever I do talk about, it might be triggering. So if it's okay, if you need to take care of yourself, you can just step aside and then come back and then we can continue to go. So my trauma started at the age of 4. I was physically and sexually abused. And I always like to highlight what happened as a child because people need to know about ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, why people do what they do, like looking at the bigger picture. So I grew up in a single parent household and I grew up in poverty. So there was a lot of diversity that happened for me as I grew up, how it led me to being trafficked. So as the abuse continued to happen, I developed coping mechanisms that weren't healthy. And I thought abuse was love. I thought that I was meant to be hit and that was a form of love. And I took this mindset into my adult years. And also I want to highlight about generational cycles. So generational cycles is something that happens within our families that can carry on to the next person, to the next person. So my mom was physically abused and so was my grandmother. So they were repeating the cycle within my family. And when I realized what that meant, I decided I had to stop within my family, that I could no longer repeat it so my children can have a fighting chance. So, and I'm not making excuses. I'm just saying my mom did what she did at the time because that's what she knew. So like I was physically abused in my house by my mom. And so that happened for many years. And then I eventually was placed in the foster care system. And when you're placed in a foster care system, you are supposed to be protected in this home. But because back in the days at that time, those parents I was placed with were also abusive. So I didn't feel safe in that home. I didn't feel safe with my mom, and I definitely did not feel safe with law enforcement because I did reach out to them at one point and they didn't hear me. So that's why it's important that we're all here, learning about one another, learning about our resources, collaboration, so we can be there for those that need that help. And so when I was placed in the foster home, I ended up running away because I didn't feel safe there and I didn't feel safe going back home. So I went to my dad's thinking that if I was with my dad, that I will be able to get my needs met. And like I said, I didn't grow up with my dad. So when I got with him, he was an alcoholic and he wasn't able to be there for me. So eventually I turned to the streets. I ended up meeting my first trafficker and he told me I was beautiful. He was 27 at the time and I was 15. He said, "You're beautiful, you're gorgeous, what is your name?" He basically preyed on my vulnerability and told me all the things I never heard growing up. So when I heard this, I thought he was the answer to my prayers. I thought this was the man, the father figure I was always looking for. And I didn't know what he was going to do. And so we need to understand when we're working with youth coming from broken homes or coming from trauma or vulnerable youth that need that attention, we need to understand what happens to vulnerable people like that. And so eventually he took me to 16th and Mission, 17th and Cap, and 20th and Shotwell. And those were the areas I was trafficked. And there's like a whole honeymoon process, like a honeymoon phase, a grooming process that everyone needs to get educated around. And I do have a book. I wrote a book, so if you want to know more details of my story, you can check out my book. Follow Vanessa, Love Never Fails. They do presentations on human trafficking all the time, so I always encourage people to do presentations to understand what are the signs and how people get lured into trafficking. So I was trafficked out those corners at the age of 15. And then I ended up having a female trafficker that was connected to my boyfriend. And females can be traffickers too, but we have to remember at some point, they were victims themselves and they were trained to do what they were doing. So we need to understand, okay, it's a full help. Like we need to be able to help them. Even though they might be trafficking at the moment, we need to help them too because they were victims at one point. So because of that situation, she was trafficking me as well. And so eventually I ended up picking up addiction of meth. These are a few of my mugshots. That's when I went to prison at 21. So because of my trauma that I experienced at a very young age that were unaddressed, Because of my mindset thinking that love was abuse, I had to get into relationships that beat me. Like, I needed to be with men that beat me, and if they didn't love me. But this was something I had developed because I was being abused by my mom. And so trafficking ties in with addiction, incarceration, and domestic violence. It's interpersonal trauma. It's interpersonal violence that we need to understand what these victims are going through when we work with them. And so, because of my trauma, I picked an addiction of meth. I was hooked on meth for about 12 years. And I was in and out of correctional facilities because my mind, I had criminal thinking. I had developed survival skills and survival, like I was surviving. Like, what else was I supposed to do when you're out there on the streets? So I ended up meeting my third trafficker. And so this is a form of labor trafficking. A lot of the times when you see those cases where there's big drug busts, sometimes there's victims that are involved in that. Those are called drug runners. So I was a drug runner. So my third connect gave me a large amount of drugs to sell for him. And he told me, if you give me, here, you have 5 days to get off these drugs. If you give me the money, then I'll continue to give you more drugs and you bring me back my money. So I thought it was okay. I thought this was a way out of being sex trafficked. And I'm like, well, I'd rather do this than be sold at the corners and be repetitively raped by these men. I'd rather do this. But in reality, it was the same trauma. It's the same revolving door. It's trafficking. But I didn't know that. So there's been times where my trafficker will kidnap me because I was in debt. I was smoking my own supply, so I continued to be in debt. I would get arrested with his drugs and get out and be in debt. So I was in this revolving door of trauma and abuse and fear because I felt like I couldn't get out and I didn't want to go back to whatever I was doing before. And so this was my last mug shot. So at the age of 26, I was arrested for the last time. And this was my wake-up call. Like, this needed to happen. Not everybody needs to be arrested and hit rock bottom like this, but that happened for me. And I believe in a higher power. I believe in God. That's what works for me in my spiritual walk. And I feel like God used this situation to turn my life around. I decided at this very moment I needed to do something different, that my son needed a fighting chance. He was 3 months old and I had left him at a dope house. So I decided I needed to stop. I ended up getting 5 years between 2 different counties. I did half of my time in San Mateo County and the rest in Sonoma County. And when I was incarcerated, I didn't know how to stop, but I realized, okay, you know what? I gotta let my guard down because I started meeting individuals like Christina Corpus, who is the sheriff of San Mateo County. So she was the first law enforcement that I connected with that I started to let my guard down. She started to really she pulled me out of my cell over the years and tell me that I was important. Tell me and that's what Ted does. He goes to these prisons and he tells these individuals that they're important, they have worth more. They're worth more. So when she did that, I didn't understand at the time, but now I know why she was doing that. And because of her interactions of showing me that she cares and her compassion, I really started to let my guard down. And so I remember getting my GED when I was incarcerated. And when I got my GED, that was my first accomplishment of doing something positive. Like, I felt a natural high, right? Like, I've never felt this natural high. And I'm like, wait, what is this? Because I was always high. Because when you're sex trafficked or been incarcerated or on the streets and surviving, you are trying to numb out. You need to dissociate and check out. And I was always high. But I got my GED, and I felt an empowerment in a sense of, like, purpose. So that it motivated me to continue to do something different. I remember I was sitting in group in a program called Starting Point, and they told me I needed to start being honest. Because when you're on the streets, you're thinking, oh, I need to survive. I'm not going to be honest. I'm going to do everything I need to do to survive. So when they told me I needed to be honest, I said, okay, I'll do it now because I'm desperate. So I started to learn how to be honest, incarcerated. I got released in 2013, I got released. And I went to Women's Recovery Services, and that's where I learned that I was a victim of human trafficking, that there's no such thing as a child prostitute. So when I learned this, I took my power back. Like, I was in a group setting where I learned, you know what? It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to tell your truth. Like, we need more survivors to step up and be courageous and bold, to share their testimony and their story so others can be inspired. Because I personally feel if we have more survivors rise up, that is how we're going to end human trafficking. That is one of the ways we're going to end trafficking, because they're going to understand what trafficking is and what's love and what's not love and what's right and what's not right and what's boundaries, what's life skills. They're going to learn all of this stuff. What is the right exit resource and who has their support? Family doesn't have to be blood. Family can be community members like all of us. Like, Vanessa's a family member to me. And because I don't have my family with me, I have members in my life that God put in my life to support me to get to where I'm at today. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's all a community effort. And so I was able to get out of Women's Recovery Services, went to Santa Rosa Junior College. I got my associate's degree, 3 associate's degrees. I was able to receive a governor's pardon from Governor Jerry Brown. Yes. Like Vanessa said, I got my master's in social justice and human rights, and I'm starting my PhD in January in Christian leadership and ministry leadership. Yes. 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 So, and that's because it's just the grace of God and all the members that have my back. I've always had people supporting me throughout my journey. I was able to receive the Women's of the Year award from Mike Thompson. I speak at the Women's Facility in Redwood City now. I give back. So this is a powerful moment right here. So I did my photo shoot for my graduation pictures on 20th and Shotwell. The very corner I was sold at. I went back to those corners. Yes.
Take it back.
I took it back. Exactly. I went back to those corners and said, I take my power back. And I want, yes. And I want other survivors to know they too can do something different. They too can get an education. So I went back to that very corner and took my power back. I came out with a book, so you can check out my book afterwards. I was on the news, KPIX News. And Christina Corpus, she's another mentor for me. So for me to speak out her swearing was a full circle for me. Wow. So I just want everybody to know to not give up and continue to plant those seeds of hope. Me and my partner, Lisa, we won the Women's of the Year Award. And so now I'm the founder. Me and my partner, Lisa, are both co-founders of Redemption House, an organization in Sonoma County. And we are survivor-led. We're using our pain for purpose and helping survivors to overcome and use their stories to help others. And so I always like to close with a verse. So Luke, and this is something that Vanessa always encourages me to do too. So Luke 13:6-8, according to the Bible Gateway, it states, then Jesus told this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there was any fruit on it. But he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to his gardener, I've waited 3 years and there hasn't been a single fig cut it down. It's just taking up space in the garden. The gardener answered, sir, give it one more chance. Leave it another year. And I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer. If we get figs next year, fine. If not, then you cut it down. So for this, what I got out of this message is keep at it. Whoever you're working for, all the stuff that we're doing here in San Francisco to bring awareness around trafficking, addiction, homelessness, all of it. Like me and Vanessa Love Never Fails, we go to Tenderloins and we show them love on the streets. On Shotwell, we show them love on the streets. Keep at it. There are miracles coming. Don't give up. My miracle took a very long time, but I'm here standing as proof that it happens. So don't give up. Sometimes we grow weary for doing what's right, but don't give up because in due season we'll reap if we don't lose heart. So here's my resources, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.